I'll start. Could you speak a little bit more about your methodology? You said you used open-ended interviews, guided and open-ended interviews, did you say? Could you speak a little bit more about that process, how you coded your interviews, the kinds of questions that you asked, more about the method?
So in the beginning, for my first interview, it was a very structured, what's your name, how old are you, what grade are you in, what school, and I wanted to know a little bit about their family background, and every student received the same interview. And my methodology would be to record our interview, and I had the questions printed out previously, and then I would go home that night and transcribe it, and at the same time I would write a reflection of how I felt it went, and my feelings and the demeanor of the student. So when I went back to read the interview, I would remember how it felt and not just the answers. And then I did that about 5 times for each student, and I would get increasingly more into my question of my thesis. And one question that I remember was a big hit, which was, if you were a teacher, how would you run the classroom? And that really gave me insight into how they saw what they wanted in education and in school versus what they were actually getting. So I tried to ask questions that really allowed them to show me what they wanted versus what they were getting. And I tried to do a lot of open-ended questions as I got further into the interview process, just so they could talk more freely. And it was a little difficult because sometimes, either because the student, like Ashley was so quiet, it was hard to pull the answers out of her, or George was having a bad day and he wouldn't want to answer. So I found the best method was when I took them out to like a restaurant, or was just hanging with them after Project Coach and was talking with them in big groups. That worked out the best.
So to piggyback on that, Marie, when you, let's see, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I should have written it down. Oh, what kinds of things did they say to you about if they were a teacher, or if they could re-envision their school? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, one of the most, one of the answers that hit me the most was when I asked about how, I was asking Alex how he would run a classroom, and he said, first of all, I wouldn't have rows. I'd have everyone sitting on the floor. And he said I wouldn't have folders, notebooks, unless they wanted to write stuff down. But he said he would be so interesting that no one would want to look away. And then the best thing he said was he wouldn't assign homework because he doesn't think it's fair that kids have to go home by themselves and do it. And he instead believes that a teacher should be there for the student whenever they're giving them work, and that they should be there to support the student at all times. And he said the teacher should walk up and down the rows and ask every student how they're doing and if they need help with something. And he said that is what would work for me. And then he said, I know that that method might not work for everybody, but so, and seeing him in school and seeing how he doesn't even connect to any of the teachers, it really struck me, because you would think that he doesn't care about teachers at all and, you know, doesn't want them to help him, but it's what he really does want. Another student said that she would have bonding time in the beginning of every class and put a question on the board that would allow her to get to know her students more. And one of her ideas was asking them if they could change the world, what would be one thing they would change. So their answers were very surprisingly insightful to how they want a classroom to run, but sadly, at the same time, almost impossible when you have, you know, your time limit and a block schedule and your curriculum that's been set for you.
Could you talk a little bit more about how you chose your participants? Was it by design that all your participants were not successful in school? And if you had chosen a participant who was successful in both sites, would that have changed the outcomes of your study? What do you think?
Actually, one student is successful in school. That's Ashley, or the quiet one, who I said does try really hard in school but keeps this very big defense mechanism up, which is very quiet. She's doing very well in school. Maybe not as good as she could, but she is much more successful than the other students. I chose them. I wanted 2 boys and 2 girls, and I chose Alex and George because I loved what they were doing in Project Coach, and they just blew my mind every day that I saw them interacting with the kids. And what continued to blow my mind even more was hearing that they were failing the majority of their classes, and I really wanted to talk to them and get to know why they weren't doing well. And likely with another girl, Claire, she was on the border. She would do well sometimes, not do well other times, and she was kind of the same way in Project Coach because it was at the beginning, so she was very quiet and closed off, so I wanted to get to know her. And then Ashley was doing well in school and also very quiet in Project Coach, but doing a good job. So the main criteria, though, was the 2 boys, the 2 girls. And all of them are pretty much struggling in school, so it's universal criteria.
I have another question. So when you laid out those 3 big questions that you, how do programs like Project Coach give students incentive, what distinguishes after-school programs from school, and what can schools learn from successes of after-school programs, I know that Project Coach has been trying for a long time to figure out this very question of how to get students in Project Coach to do transference to better academic success. The things that you concluded that the Project Coach gives students a voluntary structured activity, that it draws on intrinsic motivation, that it's a person-environment fit, that it basically that it builds on personal relationships. All of that still doesn't really answer the question for me about because schools will never be able to create the intimacy, as you just noted,
right.
The intimacy of relationships, the one-on-one, the person-environmental fit, the intrinsic motivation. I mean, it's true that high-stakes tests totally alienate a large population of kids, but even in the most progressive school,
right.
There's still a kind of work that has to be done that's going to be essentially uninteresting,
Right.
at least at a certain point
Right.
along the way. So what is, from your point of view, what can schools do? I mean, what did you learn from this that you can take back if you're a future principal or something? What could you do to make this connection between school and after school that would improve the transference?
So Project Coach has a day for the week that is an academic day, and none of the kids are thrilled about having to sit and learn skills that we're teaching them. But it's the fact that it's not just Sam or Don or Andy standing up in front of them talking to them the entire time. They give them time to talk in small groups and to get their own ideas out. And they use different methods of teaching the same things. And a lot of it is giving them the opportunity to get up and move around and to not just sit there staring at one individual. And also to continually ask them for their input and examples. And I think so much of the time, so many teachers feel almost afraid to invite such activity and interaction in the classroom because they're afraid of losing control, especially with teenagers in an urban setting. But I think once you establish respect, like the leaders of Project Coach have done, that's not going to happen because